So Guild Wars 2 has a ton of things that get thrown at you very, very fast. Literally, you blink and you're level 25 with bags overflowing and have no idea what the hell just happened. Well, that's where I'm going to help you out. These are the 12 critical tips to help new players out in their Guild Wars 2 journey. These tips are in no particular order, the ones that I figured out playing this wonderful game. Let's get into it. First tip is when you are creating your character, the race you choose does not matter. I mean, it does in a cosmetic sense and how your character looks and feels and their attack animations, but aside from a few small utility skills, there really isn't any difference between the races. Those race-specific skills tend to be a weaker and less effective option when compared to the class-specific skills. So don't really stress about that too much. Pick the one that you think looks the coolest, honestly. Also, with that, your class has far more importance in your Guild Wars 2 journey. Each of the classes can fit a number of different roles and playstyles, so play what you think is fun. At the end of this video, I've included a link which will cover all 9 classes in detail, so stay tuned for that. If you are more interested in trying the classes before you fully commit to one, there's a couple of ways that you can try them out before putting hours and hours in. Most expansions give you a max level boost, and you can use this to trial that particular class for a bit and get a better idea. You basically get to do everything that's over here in this Silver Waste map and understand a lot more about this particular class. The other method is, if you don't have that boost, is that you can finish your starter mission and then go to the PvP lobby. You click this tab and go to the Heart of the Mists. This teleports you to the PvP hub where you will be instantly boosted to max level with all the available elite specializations unlocked. This way you can trial everything that you have unlocked simply and quickly to get a better idea if you think this is something that you would like to play. Next, I focus on your bag slots and inventory management. In Guild Wars 2, we receive a ton of loot from everything. Like a single mob can drop like 25 pieces of gear. It's ridiculous. Most of it is crap, but your inventory will fill up fast. My tip is to you, invest in some larger bags, like 18 slots or more. You will find that very quickly you will get a ton of items in your travels, so making sure that you have the space to handle them is pivotal. It'll make your experience in this game a lot better. Paired with that, getting a salvage kit and salvaging the unneeded gear will help you a ton down the road when it comes to crafting and we'll say any of the endgame collection. Salvage kits can be bought from basically any vendor and can provide a ton of crafting materials the more that you salvage. Typically, I suggest for any unidentified gear that you do identify it. This is because there's a small chance that it could be something really rare and it could increase its value. And then salvage any green or blue gear that you get through this method. I also carry around a special kit for yellow or orange gear types. These are rare and exotic gear. I use the Master Salvage Kit. You use a higher tier salvaging kit for some higher gear and you have a better chance of getting better rewards like globs of ectoplasm. There is of course some debate here of what is perfect, but this is just the way that I do it. If you do get an exotic piece of gear, I always recommend to check the price on the trading post, as sometimes it might be worth a good bit of gold. If not, you can salvage that one too. Once you have salvaged all the gear and the raw crafting materials, a side tip to here is that you can press this button right up here at the top right of your inventory and deposit them all into your personal bank without actually having to leave wherever you are. This is just very convenient. This kind of leads me into my next point talking about gear. Gear in Guild Wars 2 is not really its endgame like other MMOs. Most gear has very incredibly similar values, with only major differences being a few percentages in output. Exotic gear is significantly cheaper to get versus ascended or legendary gear, which provide the highest stat values. Except exotic gear really isn't too far behind. You can purchase certain named exotic gear off of the trading post for very cheap. Or even now there's a new world versus world vendor for some gold and some marks of honor. You can get exotic gear all the way across the board. I have videos in the description talking about both of these methods, but just know that the only place that exotic gear really wouldn't be accepted is in higher end fractals of the mists, which require either ascended or legendary gear, but this is because they are dealing with a certain mechanic that's tied to that game mode. This video here will talk more about fractals if you are curious. My next tip is around the story. While I have thoroughly enjoyed the story in Guild Wars 2, that is only like a tenth of what the game has to actually offer. literally there's a ton of different endgame modes, collections, RP, mounts, everything that you can really think of, and most of them have little to nothing to do with the story. Guild Wars 2 has a habit of being a self-guiding kind of game that wants you to focus and push out your own objectives and goals without exactly telling you what those are. If you want to do the general lay of the land before you progress, I'd suggest sticking with the story. You get a better understanding of everything that's happening in the game, and as you're going through, you get certain areas and zones unlocked, especially if you have the expansions or the Living World seasons. But if you are self-motivated and don't really care for the story, I say start working on something in endgame once you have reached max level, such as a legendary collection or perhaps participating in World versus World. And something that feels like a little bit of a hack for World v World specifically, although you can technically do this in the Heart of the Mist's main hub, is use this instant and free town center teleport that has basically everything that you need in a city hub quickly, concisely, and we'll say tightly packed. The Obsidian Sanctum basically has all of your normal vendors and merchants at your disposal for free. Then you can teleport right out and pop back in where you left off. This is a great tool if you ever need to empty your inventory or need to clear excessive bag space that is quick and simple with no strings attached. Something that is good to note for the extra value for your account is the use of a bag mule. Now, Guild Wars 2 monetizes itself via pay-for-convenience methods such as bank slots, bag slots, material storage, and more. They offer a small storage space and sell it back to you for profit. I mean, at this rate, I don't think I'll ever get ArenaNet partner, so let's just keep trucking on. One trick that can work excessively well is if you have a spare character slot within your account. You can create a new character, purchase some bags for them, and then use them as a storage mule. This works great for extra materials you want to hold on to but are out of space. But typically, if you have an extra character slot open, or even if you purchase a character slot, it is far more effective and only slightly more expensive than buying a brand new bank slot tab. Point being is that if you have the spot, then you have some sweet loot space. Also, about those mules, they can provide a significant amount of gold passively over time. A tried and true method of farming gold in this game is related to alt parking. Now, to be sure, this won't turn over thousands of gold a day, but over time it can generate some decent coin. Alt parking is typically more profitable in the expansion zones, such as End of Dragons and or Icebrood Saga, and I have a video up here that we can talk about some quick ways that you can generate gold with these alt parkings, but keeping them parked somewhere where loot is can get you money daily. Even in Quarterias, some places like at the end of a jumping puzzle could be a good spot for you to park your alt and open up the chest once a day to get some free loot. And also, this is a bit of a side tip paired to this one, plus one we'll say, is once you get your alts a little bit of time of existence, it's actually better to just let them stay where they are and who they are and not delete them, as year over year they will build up birthday gifts that can be used to get some goodies. Guild Wars 2 has a ton of small and, we will say, minor features that don't necessarily lend to themselves, but one tip that I would suggest is something for quick leveling, and this is kind of broken into 3 parts. After a while of the gameplay loop, completing this hard, viewing a vista, stopping at this particular event, it can grow a little bit old, and you want to get to endgame. To speed that along, I suggest these 3 different methods. One is get invited to a high-level guild. Once you are a part of that guild, go to the guild hall and visit their tavern. There they will have an experience booster flask for free. Equip this and then purchase some low-tier food, either from the trading post or craft it if you have that. Just about every food piece in-game grants you more experience when you kill mobs. And once you have all that together, focus on completing the character adventure guide, which is a new feature that grants experience once you have earned these small achievements, and then you will be zooming through the levels. If it is your first playthrough of Guild Wars 2, I suggest you take your time and enjoy it all the way through. However, if you're trying to level up an alt and you're trying to make it as painless as possible, this is a good method. Something that is relevant in just about every single MMO is crafting, and here in Guild Wars 2, that is no different. Crafting can be used for a number of things in game, and most commonly is gear creation. This, however, is a bit counterproductive because of one of my previous tips that I talk about how you can get some easy gear and what you need to do. So why would we need crafting? Well, outside of gear, crafting can have a number of other uses, specifically when it comes to making ascended or legendary gear. Ascended and legendary gear, remind you, has the highest stat value in game. Legendary gear is incredibly flexible and is usable by all characters on your account who can use that particular piece of gear. Aside from that, certain crafting reagents needed to make these endgame pieces require levels of 400, 450, or even 500 of crafting, which actually make crafting very useful despite the gear production bringing it down. It can still be beneficial for you to have that higher level crafting on some of your tunes. A note to mention is that some of the legendary crafting requires multiple disciplines to be at high level, so having just a variety of crafting professionals across your account will make things a hell of a lot easier. Also paired with that, some of the ascended level crafting materials such as like Alonian leather or Deldrimore ingots can be sold for decent gold on the trading post, saying that you have most of the materials. You can make a small profit just by turning it over and purchasing it on the trading post, but that's another topic. This is something that I will reiterate, as I have mentioned this a number of times in my previous videos, but the lack of dedicated Holy Trinity in this MMO. This knowledge pairs well, of course, when you were picking your class in the game, as a lot of people fall into the trap of, say, for example, picking a Guardian because they think it will be the one who tanks bosses, only to find out that it's actually one of the best supports in the game. Guild Wars 2 has a few variations of this standard formula, and this really only pays note in, we'll say, raid strikes and other focused PvE content. Typically, you have DPS and you have supports. DPS is just that, damage per second. Supports are an all-encompassing healer, buff provider, and even in some circumstances, the tank for a boss. See, in this game, mobs only usually attack the target with the highest amount of toughness in the group. This toughness stat reduces the amount of physical damage you take from a strike. So if you have a ton of toughness, you will probably be tanking. Some supports don, when necessary, certain gear that has healing power and toughness to take the brunt of an attack from the bosses, while also providing excellent healing to their allies. I would also be remiss to say that there is a subsection of the DPS called a boon support DPS, and they focus on doing their damage, of course, but they are also responsible for upkeeping a specific boon, such as quickness or alacrity, which are both incredibly vital to endgame content. My advice to you is to pick the class that you think you would enjoy the most, as either the core spec or even the elite specs that are tied to it can fit a number of different roles down the line. And lastly, most importantly, do your research. There are a number of dedicated and great websites that offer a plethora of information of this great game, such as the Guild Wars 2 Wiki, which is your basic centered house of all in-game knowledge. Others would be like Snow Crows that offer the very best in PvE endgame builds, or perhaps even GuildGen, which offers a number of different builds but focuses heavily on world versus world. There are plenty of resources out there for your use, and it's something I would recommend taking some time to look at as you were playing this game. You get a better picture. I've also included some of the links of the ones that I recommend in the description below. This game is great, and I am happy to help you get started. I would also recommend you to click on this video here to see all 9 new player class guides in Guild Wars 2. As always, stay caffeinated, folks.